Hey, this is manic.mercurian with your birth chart reading. This reading will be for Wednesday, July 21st, 1999 at 8:09 a.m. in Pasadena, California. So this means that you have Sun in Cancer with Moon in Scorpio and Leo rising. Okay, so first, let's just approach this kind of from a simple starting point, just to begin things here. So you have Sun in Cancer with Moon in Scorpio. Both of these placements have a lot in common. They're both water signs. This does mean that you have a lot of water in your chart. Water, as you may know, is the element that corresponds to emotion, creativity, intuition, spirituality. It's the element that has to do with feeling. So this means that you feel very deeply. Um, because you have, well, Sun in Cancer is probably the most emotional sun sign, and then having Moon in Scorpio means that you have very deep emotions. So you not only feel a very wide a range of emotion, but also the depth and the complexity is very strong as well. I think with any kind of deep feeling, very emotional personality type, the way you learn to handle emotion will be, it'll make or break you. It can be a challenge, it can be a hindrance, but it can also be very valuable, because in that emotion is intelligence, is intuition, and even psychic abilities as well. So definitely a lot of strength there. I really can't emphasize that enough. That emotion is very valuable. I think especially if you learn to kind of utilize it. But again, on the other hand, it can be overwhelming dealing with that level of emotion, being more emotional than maybe your peers, that type of thing. However, what I find interesting, and of course this is all speculation, but based on your placements here, I don't know if everyone realizes how emotional you are. I don't think this is something that you are typically transparent about. And we can look to astrological symbology to see why. So Sun is in Cancer, Moon is in Scorpio. Again, these are the placements that kind of have to do with the bulk of the personality, I would say. And Sun is in Cancer, so that's the sign of the crab. Moon is in Scorpio, sign of the scorpion. Both the crab and the scorpion, they're invertebrates. They have hard exteriors. They have an exoskeleton, so they've got that hard shell on the outside, and then the soft inside. So you can see a pretty clear analogy from that. You yourself would be much like a crab or scorpion in that capacity. You would have this kind of very tough, hard exterior. People with these placements can kind of act tough, and you are definitely most likely very resilient. But you have being so deeply feeling, being so sensitive, and being in this world that we are in, you have to protect yourself, so you have those defense mechanisms. Um, what else here? Yes, and I think another interesting part of that too is that when individuals like yourself have both Sun and Moon in a water sign, a lot of times they can come across much more detached than what we might suspect. Again, these are water placements, so they're supposed to be all about emotion. But at least looking at it from the outside, people with placements like this, again, they can appear very detached, very logical. And I think I can only really speculate. But I think part of this is when you have both Sun and Moon in water signs, they are in mutual kind of agreement with each other. They're in a trine, not necessarily by aspect in your chart, but they're at least trining by sign. So they're supporting one another. So in other words, you can be confident in your emotion. You can be, in a way, it's kind of all you have. You don't have a lot of filters with other lenses. You go all out into that emotion. And what's interesting is that from that place of kind of emotion and speculation, you can actually end up appearing and operating in a very logical kind of way. I don't know if hopefully that makes sense, but part of this too is that Sun in Cancer does have excellent common sense. It's very pragmatic, and because you have Moon in Scorpio, you do have superior analytical ability. And this is actually a really interesting part of your chart. We'll talk about Mercury here in just a moment, but um, you actually have multiple placements which indicate that not only are you very emotional, very sensitive, very intuitive, but there are some placements indicating, I don't want to say high intelligence necessarily because that can mean so many different things. Um, but you have South Node in Aquarius, which indicates that you've always been kind of a problem solver, very logical from a young age. We'll talk more about that later in the reading. And then again, going back to Moon and Scorpio, that indicates that you're always kind of thinking, analyzing. You're sort of restless. You're always looking for something to work on, something to do. That's kind of the blessing and the curse of having Moon in Scorpio. It's a detriment placement. It's very challenging, but it's what kind of keeps you on your feet. It's what keeps you growing, learning, adapting, changing, and because you're in this kind of survival mentality, you not only use your intuition and your feeling to the best of your ability to sense your surroundings and understand your surroundings, but you also tap into the mind and the intellect as well. So that's where having strong placements in Scorpio like this, I think it can be interesting and even admirable from the outside because it creates people that are so deeply emotional, so intuitive, so analytical. But again, this is all coming from a place of survival, basically, having to understand the environment in order to survive. So that's kind of the energy that you carry. These kind of tendencies can allow you to do really great things. They can, especially when combined with your ambition. But at the root of it, it's a survival mentality mechanism. So hopefully that makes sense. A different way we could kind of look at your chart is, how do I put this? I think that, again, the way you come across to people is not always true to who you are on a deeper level. The reason why I say that is because you have Moon in Scorpio, so right off the bat, when individuals have Moon in Scorpio, they tend to stay very private, and that has to do with that shell. They know that they can't expose their sensitivities, so they keep that under wraps and only reveal it when they feel safe to do so, and that is very rare. Okay, so right off the bat, there's these kind of like layers to your personality, I guess you could call it. But also, I think it's very interesting that what's juxtaposed with that very private Scorpio moon, that emotional interior that's very much kept under wraps and even in lockdown, if you will. In juxtaposition to all that is Sun in Cancer and Leo rising. These placements indicate that you're very readily willing and able to connect with others. So you may come across as relatable, what's the word, non-threatening. People feel comfortable around you. They feel like they can connect with you. And much of that is true, but again, they're not seeing the whole picture. There's, I'm not sure how else to put that. Others can connect with you very readily, but they're not, I don't think they realize that there's a lot going on under the surface with you. Not only do you have a lot of placements in the kind of bottom hemisphere of the chart, but also going back again to that Moon in Scorpio, I would suspect you have many secrets, and you may not view them as secrets per se, but there is likely a lot that you would not share with just anyone or everyone. You may come across as very giving, very generous, very warm at times, but there's a lot going on under the surface, though. Okay, let me kind of just look around really quickly here before I continue. I want to just touch on something I was kind of getting into just a little bit earlier here. So, again, it's very interesting. So, having Sun in Cancer with Moon in Scorpio, it's this combination of being very emotional, but looking at it from the outside, others may not realize just how emotional you really are. Um, this is especially true because you have Sun and Mercury in the 12th house. So this hides much of your personality even further. I think you are very much a mystery to most people in your life. You may be very secluded a lot. You may spend a lot of time just, with yourself, being in your own thoughts. Um, and I think although there are, of course, necessary limits and boundaries that we have to have with solitude and isolation and ruminating, things of that nature, we must do these things in moderation. But for you, you have North Node in 12th house, so this shows that it's okay for you to do that. You actually grow stronger by doing that. Part of this I would suspect is just, we have to spend time alone with our own thoughts in order to build intuition. And, like we covered, you already have a lot of kind of facets, a lot of placements in your chart that are conducive to a propensity for growing very strong intuition. So that combined with North Node in the 12th house shows that the more you kind of delve into spirituality and metaphysics, understanding kind of obscure or occult topics, and as also the more time you spend kind of just alone contemplating, of course with some healthy limits or boundaries, the more you engage in all of those kinds of activities and pastimes, the stronger you will get. These are necessary for your evolution and your growth and your expansion. So that's really great. The way these placements are situated, it looks like a very easy path for you. Not everyone has that. In other words, the pastimes that you are naturally drawn to, generally speaking, will aid in your evolution and soul growth. Most people, it's not that simple. Most people, there's more of a, they have to push themselves to get out of their comfort zone to do what's best for them, if that makes sense. And for you, for the most part, that's not so much the case. At least that's what I'm seeing based on your chart here. Okay, and what else here? I'm gonna go forward into these other parts of the reading, and then we'll be able to delve a lot further into these different parts of your personality through these other chapters. So let's talk about your past life information, your upbringing, challenges. These are very relevant for you. Obviously, they're relevant for everyone, but especially for you because of the way your placements are situated. So first, let's talk about your past lives. You have South Node in Aquarius, and it's conjunct Uranus. So South Node at 13 degrees Aquarius, conjunct Uranus at 15 degrees Aquarius. This suggests that in a past life you were an inventor, some kind of thinker, scientist, maybe like a doctor, someone who was a genius of sorts or dealt with very complex information, someone who spent their time, spent their energy, spent their life working to fix problems or working to help humanity in some way, but helping humanity in a way that was indirect. So again, the inventor that, invents something that can maybe make everyone's lives a little bit easier, safer, more convenient. But, that's much different than physically helping someone in a direct way. You would be behind the scenes creating something that will help society, help everyone, through, I don't know, through some kind of product or something like that. Or again, it could be like a doctor who is helping someone with their intellectual prowess, their understanding of, a large amount of data, and using kind of detached objectivity in order to make the correct decisions in order to help other people. Does that make sense? That's kind of the general theme there. So when it comes to specific like occupations, I don't know. I can only see the themes. So that's where I say, doctor, inventor, scientist, something of that nature. So coming into this life, you embody that energy in this life as well. You still Well, we can really see this in childhood. So talking about your kind of upbringing in your childhood, what kind of kid you would be. South Node in Aquarius suggests that you were likely a very smart kid, kind of a prodigy, someone who is ahead of their classmates at a very early age. Because the reason being is because South Node in Aquarius, that means that you embody the energy of Aquarius from a young age. You've mastered this energy. You've dealt with these types of themes for a long time in past lives. So coming into this life, you already know this type of energy. In other words, coming into this life, South Node in Aquarius suggests that you start out life being very objective, a little detached, very intelligent. You're very able to consume information and see the bigger picture. So these traits are very unusual for a child. We don't associate these traits with children. Being so objective, being so future oriented, thinking about the long term, thinking about the bigger picture outside of yourself, being so intellectual. That's where you would be a very precocious child. At least that's what this placement suggests. All of this is strengthened by the fact that South Node is conjunct Uranus as well. So this is really great when it comes to being really smart, ahead of your time. There are a lot of advantages there for a young kid, but the difficulty comes with not being able to relate to your peers, being maybe ostracized. There's a lot of eccentricities that come with these types of placements. So not everyone will understand you. They may think you're too weird or too strange. It's just that they don't understand what you can see, especially from a young age. We're talking about childhood here still. And I do think it's very interesting that, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, although you may be starting out life very detached and coming from a place where you had to master that kind of detached logic in past lives, that is combined with these very watery placements in this life where you also delve into some really strong emotions. So I think much of your challenge as well as your opportunity in this life is to master the combination of both. The combination of the benefits and the challenges of emotion as well as detachedness and logic. Really going far in both of those directions. How can we use not only a really cold, calculated understanding of things to our advantage, but also a more subjective, emotional, kind of heartfelt way of looking at things as well? How can we combine the two to really get a full picture? Does that make sense? I know it's a little bit vague and abstract, but I think that will make sense to you because that's what I see based on your placements. Okay, going back to your childhood again though. So another placement we can look to gain information about your childhood and upbringing is the IC. That would be the black triangle at the very base of the chart. For you, it's at 20 degrees Scorpio. So this also, there are some shared themes to what we were just talking about. Being kind of an outcast as a child, being viewed as strange. But here we're bringing in more Scorpio energy. So as a child, you may have had very strong emotions. And I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit. Your chart's indicating that as a child you were very detached, cold, analytical, intellectual, and simultaneously you were emotional as well, experiencing very deep emotions. And I don't think this is as contradictory as it sounds. Sometimes when we experience trauma or really deep emotions, it can be a natural reaction to detach from it and to master, the art of dissociation. So what else here? So the two can go hand in hand, I guess, is what I'm getting at. But this is especially true in your upbringing, I think. It looks like a kind of a challenging upbringing based on these placements. because you have sun and moon both in water signs, this suggests that your parents got along with each other on some level, or whoever you were raised by, basically. So whether that was one person or two people, the way the sun and the moon are positioned indicates that your guardian or guardians they had some kind of consistency. So if you grew up with both parents, they probably got along well. They had enough in common, to have a consistent kind of parenting style, if that makes sense. So you knew what was expected of you. Um, at the same time, though, because you have all these Scorpio placements, Scorpio, Mars, Moon, IC, um, that indicates that although there was consistency in your household growing up, you felt like things were chaotic at the same time. So maybe it was like consistent chaos. I'm not sure how to put that together exactly, but you, you, yeah, I'm not sure how it works exactly, but maybe this will be true for you, or maybe you'll understand. But yeah, both are true. You knew what was expected of you. There was consistency there. But at the same time, everything was sort of constantly tumultuous and very emotional. And so you would react to that by seeking organization, seeking structure. And I think this is something that you would retain throughout your whole life. You value consistency, you value structure. You're searching for the constants in life. You're searching for things that ground you. Of course, that's true for all of us to some extent, but this is especially true for you. You want those grounding things. So when we talk about your compatibility later, I'm kind of wondering already if you would be, earth signs may be very refreshing for you because of that consistency and that, being organized and structured and all that. I think you would really thrive with that. Um, I'm trying to think. I can't say exactly how you would go about creating that structure. Um, Most people that have Sun in Cancer and so much water in their chart are not so rigid or structured, but I would speculate that I'm kind of wondering if you are actually very structured and very organized. Um, the reason for this is because when you have such strong emotions on the inside, they are destabilizing. They can make you feel out of control. They can make you feel crazy, and so it's kind of a natural response to that to seek clarity, structure, consistency when you can, especially in your outside environment, because you feel that by controlling your environment, then you can feel at peace in yourself, basically, if that makes sense. Um, okay, what else can we say about past lives and upbringing? So part of why I say that I think your upbringing may have been very difficult, besides the Scorpio placements and the Aquarius South Node, you have a lot of activity in the 12th house, and this is very difficult energy to experience, especially at a young age. So having Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, this means that growing up you felt like you weren't allowed to express yourself. You felt like you really couldn't have your own identity, like it was frowned upon. And I've read, many people who've had placements like this. I've read their charts, and I've learned that the way this what is it, the way, feeling, what's the word, feeling like you can't express yourself, feeling kind of pushed down. I've learned that this can happen in many different ways when one has Mercury and Sun in 12th house like this. So for example, you may have just had, it could be many different things. It could be, maybe there were a lot of kids in your family and you felt like their needs came before yours, so you just had to, stay quiet and keep everything to yourself. Or maybe you had a lot of energy and your peers or your family didn't approve of it, and or it could have been some kind of traumatic event where your response was to go within yourself. But whatever it was, you learn as a child, and as a teenager to keep everything kind of to yourself and just go within yourself. And again, this is very challenging. The circumstances that led you to behave that way and learn this way and develop this way were difficult in themselves, but also this creates this kind of difficult dynamic because um, doing all this and keeping everything to yourself and dissociating, I think it's done as a necessity. It's done as an adaptation, as a survival mechanism. But you're basically, by doing that, you're basically pushing your consciousness down into your subconscious. So this means that it takes you time to develop these parts of your personality. So sun represents the ego, the individuality, what makes us different than others. The identity, our self-expression. Mercury also has to do with self-expression, but it's thoughts, the mind. So all of these parts of the personality, in some ways, you'd be kind of late to develop in a way, because much of this you pushed down. You felt like you weren't allowed to have, or you couldn't have these opinions. You couldn't have your energy. You had to keep it, locked away. So it takes time. Typically, once you reach your late teens or your 20s, that's when you go through the process of delving back into your subconscious and shining a light into the darkness, bringing your subconscious back to the conscious, if that makes sense. And this is very powerful. This is where it pays off to have 12th house placements. It's initially very difficult as a child, but once you reach adulthood and you become more self-aware, and develop these placements, because they take time to develop, that's where it's almost kind of like a superpower, because because these placements are more subconscious in nature. Once you do develop them, they are harder and more and take longer to develop, but once you do develop them, you have this kind of doorway or window to your own subconscious. You will understand yourself much more deeply than most people do. And because you understand yourself very deeply, you can understand others very deeply as well. This is strengthened by your water placements too, your Scorpio placements and your Cancer placements. So all of this suggests that you are, if you so chose, you could be kind of a master manipulator. You understand other people very well. You understand psychology. A lot of this is analytical. You can observe people and figure them out very quickly, very well. But part of it too, I think, is emotional. You just feel, vibes, feelings very strongly. You can feel, how do I put this? Like, you can kind of feel if a situation or a person, you can feel where it's going to go kind of before it happens. And this is excellent because it's very efficient. Having this intuition or this psychic ability allows you to avoid outcomes that might not be preferable. You can avoid, having to have this kind of negative experience and having to learn from it. You can just cut all that out, because even though you haven't experienced something, you can already kind of sense where it's going to go and, turn a different way. Okay, so that was a little bit kind of long and rambly, but I think you get the point. These 12th house placements, very difficult at a young age, but I'd speculate by now, because you're in your early to mid 20s now, so I would speculate that you've probably had a lot of growth in this area over recent years. Let's see, especially right around age 18, usually there's kind of a growth spurt there, because that's when you had your nodal return. So basically that just means that it's a time of increased growth and expansion, like very rapid growth. This is true for everyone, but it's especially true for you because of the way that your placements are. This will happen again in your late 20s as well, age 27, 28, 29. That's that's when multiple astrological events will they'll kind of push you into developing very rapidly again. So basically, this is going to be another time where you learn more about yourself, what you want, what you need, um, and all of your kind of abilities will strengthen. Your ability to understand other people, all of that. Okay. Speaking of challenges and things like that, um, as well as your late 20s, late 20s also is the time of the Saturn return. So for you, Saturn is in Taurus. Right now, as I'm doing this reading, Saturn is just on the cusp of Pisces. It's at the very end of Aquarius. It's about to go into Pisces this week, actually. So this means that, several years down the line, once Saturn enters Taurus, then it will be at the place it was when you were born. So this will be a time of challenges, increased responsibility, having to grow up. We have to, really look within ourselves and look at maybe habits or tendencies that we have had throughout our 20s that no longer serve us. We typically start to think more about the long term, focus more on long term things. For you specifically, because you have Saturn in Taurus, this all has to do with finding stability, being grounded within yourself, being sovereign and independent, not having to rely on anyone else. I think these themes are things that you work with and are challenged by anyway throughout your regular life, but but having Saturn in Taurus shows that, especially early on, you may have struggled to know how to support yourself. You looked to others to find stability or peace, and of course that can be very dysfunctional. This is strengthened too by, you have Moon and Scorpio opposing Saturn. So, okay, how do I put this? So I think you focus very much externally. You're focused on, figuring out your surroundings, figuring out other people. We talked about that earlier, how it's part of a survival mechanism. But what Saturn and Taurus is going to show you, especially in your late 20s, is, you don't need to look to anyone else to find that stability. Ultimately, it comes from within. It comes from yourself. You don't have to rely on anyone. It's excellent, though, that you are so able to figure out such complex environments, variables, people. Again, there's a lot of really impressive logical and intuitive abilities that come from all that. So you can still keep that and utilize all that. But at the end of the day, you don't have to, go into overdrive figuring out your surroundings and trying to, predict what other people are going to do. You don't have to do all that. And in reality, the more you go down that path, the more you'll feel out of control, because you're putting your control outside of yourself, basically. You're expecting your control, your peace, your security to come from the outside world, from someone else, rather than from where it's truly going to come from, which is from yourself, basically. Hopefully that makes sense. And I want to go back to what I kind of was talking about at the beginning of this reading too. Is, it's so interesting that you have these kind of struggles that we're talking about. I'm really laying it on thick in this part of the reading here, as you can see. But it's interesting that you have these really intense struggles and these really deep themes that are going on. But again, 99% of the people in your life are not going to be aware of any of this. You've got that, sunshiny Leo rising, and even Sun in Cancer to some degree. These placements show that, you can kind of put on a face for everyone. You can kind of act the part, if that makes sense. And it's up to you. It's up to your free will, if you want to do that or how you want to do that. But I just think it's interesting looking at your chart how there's these very different kind of things going on when we look at what's going on the surface with you versus what's going on underneath, kind of. Not everyone is like that. Definitely not this much, I would say. Okay, we kind of like laid down a lot of, heavy challenges, and we talked about your past life and your upbringing. That's definitely the heaviest part of the reading by far. I think we kind of adequately covered that. Actually, real quick, one more thing about that. Let's talk about your North Node, because we talked earlier about how North Node is in 12th house. So this indicates. Let me back up just real quick here. I'm sorry, I got a little scattered. So because you have South Node in 6th house Aquarius, we talked about how this is the prodigy placement. You are excellent when it comes to learning very quickly, consuming impressive amounts of information and understanding facts and concepts, things like that. North Node is in 12th house Leo, so that indicates that the more you can combine that logical, detached, holistic understanding of things with a more subjective understanding, that's where your expansion and your growth will be. And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. So North Node in Leo means that it's okay to be logical. There's definitely a lot of strength that comes with South Node in Aquarius, being so logical, being so detached. These can definitely be strengths, but if you delve too much into that kind of energy, it will be your downfall. You have to combine all that with the themes of North Node and 12th house Leo. So basically learning to embrace your own individuality. Sometimes you don't have to just think about what everyone else thinks. What are the facts? What are the long-term consequences? This is a very responsible placement. I would speculate you're a very responsible person. And again, that's excellent. That's a really great strength to have, but balance that with focusing on what you want in the moment, because you do have a lot of Leo placements, Mercury, North Node, Ascendant. These are all showing that you have really strong heart energy. This is where your courage is going to come from, your bravery. There's a lot of fire kind of potential there, a lot of energy, a lot of heat. There's a lot of strength there. So North Node is just indicating that the more you kind of dive into that kind of energy, asserting what you want, focusing on what you want. It's okay to be subjective when it's appropriate, because that's how we find our passion, basically. So basically, it's saying to find a balance there. And like I was saying earlier, I do think this will be very natural for you because you happen to have some personal placements near your North Node. That does make things a lot easier. So in other words, like North Node shows that your expansion is found in isolation at times, spirituality, metaphysics, sovereignty, individuality, focusing on yourself, kind of. That's where your expansion is, but that you're already kind of equipped to go that direction anyway, because you have Mercury in 12th house Leo and Sun in 12th house as well. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions about what I just said or anything in this reading whatsoever, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm sure I'll say this at the end of the reading too, but I'm always willing to clarify or expand on anything, once this reading is over. Okay, let's kind of go on into the next part of this reading. So let's talk about your professional life. What would I see you kind of needing with a career or thriving with in a career? So we can look to the midheaven. Midheaven represents your reputation, your many aspects of your public life, career, things like that. Your midheaven is at 20 degrees Taurus. And to be totally honest with you, it's difficult for me to say what someone with midheaven and Taurus would best do, because really you can do a lot of different things. The way you present yourself to the world, the way people see you, especially in public and at work, is very stable and grounded. And I do think there's some truth to this, but like we talked about in the rest of the reading, I don't think they realize how deeply sensitive you are and how emotional you are. You can still, of course, take advantage of this part of yourself. When you approach things in a public way, professional way, you are very professional, very grounded. But midheaven in Taurus is excellent because not only are you professional and very, very stable, very structured, but you're also kind of relatable. Taurus midheaven is ruled by Venus, and Venus is actually making a loose trine to the midheaven too. So um, basically, you come across in a very good way. People sense that you're reliable, trustable, you're responsible. You have a kind of strong public image. People may not truly understand you because a lot of this, you keep a lot under wraps, like we talked about, but not, they won't really sense that, if that makes sense. I do think it's interesting you have Jupiter and Saturn both in the ninth house near the midheaven here. So um, this means that there's this huge strength when it comes to higher learning for you. So I do think that that can be part of your career as well. And this can look different ways, historically and still in modern times to some extent. Higher learning was done in the church, in the temple, so to speak. Nowadays, we also have universities that can be a place of higher learning. It doesn't matter what it is for you. Wherever it is that you go for understanding the nature of our world, understanding the universe, understanding philosophy. In all these areas, that's where there's potentially a lot of strength for you. Um, you also have Saturn close to the midheaven, so this indicates that you can be very authoritative. You have a very authoritative presence in public and at work. Some others definitely look up to you. You come across experienced and wise, and this will just strengthen with time. The downside of this is that many of your greatest challenges will be at work and in public. Others will kind of, they expect more of you basically. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. Others look to you as being experienced, being wise, being the one that has the answers, being the one that's in charge. So yes, there's a lot of strength there. That's definitely very powerful, but can be very difficult as well. Others will really push you at work and in public more so than maybe the typical person. So there's that. There could, something with higher learning, maybe something with maybe an authoritative position. Let's kind of look around here a little bit more. And then there is this really strong emphasis on spirituality, metaphysics too. So honestly, it's hard for me to say. I haven't been this stumped on a birth chart reading for the occupational part in a long time. Um, I would go back to the South and Aquarius. So okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. So um, I think something that will definitely come in handy. It all comes back to the combination of this really stoic, detached logic that you have, but also this really deep emotion and intuition. If you can combine those, I know this is very vague, but some kind of career or occupation that will utilize both of these, because I think this is both of these and the combination of these two themes or factors in your chart, I think are kind of your greatest strength, or at least the one that stands out to me the most. The combination of the really cold, objective logic with the emotion and the intuition. I think the combination of both of those, especially when combined with your kind of authoritative nature, at least in public and at work, I think that combination could make you a very excellent leader. So maybe like a doctor, something like that, where you have to help someone who's maybe feeling a lot of pain or emotion, but having to not only take into account that they're feeling, maybe they're suffering, but also the data. You know what I mean? Some kind of position like that, I think you could be really great at. What else? Something like that, or doctor's a really good example of that, but maybe some kind of attorney. Um, I do think you could make some really, you could be that person that has to make those hard decisions because of, kind of the tools at your disposal here in your chart. Um, this was real vague, so if you do need any clarification, definitely follow up with me. But that's kind of what I see. I'm trying to think of how else I could put that. Hopefully that makes sense. And with astrology, it's really all about themes. You have free will. I can't guess what job would be best for you. All I can see are the themes that you have. So hopefully you understand the themes I'm trying to illustrate, because that's what's going to ultimately that's what we can look to see what kind of position you operate best in, or be most satisfied with, if that makes sense. Something where you can utilize your intuition, your logic, and maybe be a leader of some kind. That part may take time. With Saturn, all things tend to take time. But I could definitely see that. You do have Moon in Scorpio. Going back to that again, you have a kind of strong ambition. You really want to get things done. So I do think you could go up to a leadership position wherever you work pretty quickly, if that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the romantic part of the reading, I guess. We'll talk about, what do you need in a relationship, what are you attracted to in a person, but also what do you truly need in a more long-term sense, and how do I see the kind of ideal relationship looking for you. And then, of course, we'll talk about what kind of signs you'd be best compatible with, which zodiac signs. Okay, so for all of that, I look mostly to Venus, Mars, and the descendant. Venus for you is in Virgo, Mars is in Scorpio, and the descendant is in Aquarius. All of these placements in different ways have to do with what you're attracted to, especially romantically and relationship-wise, among other things. So combining all of these together are all, I think they can all be a little bit detached, or so these all suggest that you may be attracted to someone that's very thoughtful, very intellectual, maybe a little bit detached. Okay, so having Venus and Virgo with Mars and Scorpio, the combination of those shows to me that you're wanting someone that is a realist for sure, someone who knows how to survive, basically. I know that sounds kind of vague, but you may be attracted to someone who's a little bit cynical or pessimistic, I guess is what I'm kind of getting at. Someone who is very adaptable, very resourceful, very cunning, very intelligent. Again, they're kind of in a survival mentality, but something about that, that's kind of what you'd be attracted to in another person, something like that. Someone very detail oriented. You're not necessarily wanting someone that's like really outgoing and confident in a very simplistic kind of way, or outward kind of way. I think you're attracted to someone that's a little bit more introverted, or very complex, very kind of, their energy is going inward more so. Someone who has layers, that would be kind of interesting for you to unravel. I think part of that too is that based on your chart, I would speculate that you are an expert when it comes to figuring people out. So I think that's maybe actually why you may be attracted to someone that's very complex, very multifaceted. Someone who kind of keeps things under wraps to some extent, just like you do. Someone who has complex layers like you do. Venus in Virgo shows that you're really wanting stability as well. That's something I talked about earlier. And to put it into astrological terms, you're attracted to, well, I think the most tangible thing would be that you're attracted to earth signs. Venus is in Virgo, so anyone with strong Virgo placements you will be attracted to, basically, or someone with Virgo traits. So someone who's detail oriented, analytical, logical, practical, grounded. These are all kind of Virgo keywords. Studious, intelligent, someone who thinks a lot, analyzes a lot. That kind of energy is going to be attractive to you. But it can also be any of the earth signs. Any of the earth signs, Virgo, Capricorn, or Taurus, are going to be very grounded, practical, consistent. They'll be a little bit predictable, but that's something that I don't think you'd mind because you're wanting that kind of structure. And this kind of goes back to something I've said about, people like yourself that have strong Scorpio placements. I think what you're wanting in another person is a combination of someone who's complex enough to be very interesting, but simple enough to feel secure. Because you need both with someone to be really engaged. You need someone that's, complex and has multiple layers to keep things interesting, but they also have to be consistent. They have to be practical because that's what's going to allow you to feel safe. And I think that's probably the most important thing out of anything here. So definitely you'll find that with Virgo or maybe other earth signs. Scorpio, there's a lot of compatibility with as well for you. You have Mars in Scorpio, so that shows that, well, Mars in Scorpio is a very sexual placement, but it's introverted. So it's sexual in the sense that it's not, it's typically not, if you have this placement, you typically wouldn't be seeking many different partners or things like that. You want to really explore the depths of one person. It's kind of a monogamous placement. So you would have excellent sexual chemistry with people who have strong Scorpio placements, but it's actually more than that. You have Moon in Scorpio as well. So anyone who has strong Scorpio placements, you'll likely relate to very well. You may have sexual chemistry too. There's going to be strong attraction there, especially if they're a male, if you are attracted to males. Definitely Scorpio. Could be women too. Same with Virgo. Virgo, definitely strong attraction to women, but men as well, whatever the case is. Either way, there would be truth in either side. So Virgo and Scorpio, definitely a lot of attraction and chemistry with those signs. We could also look to, any of the water signs you'd be compatible with. We talked about how you have Sun and Moon in Cancer and Scorpio respectively. So anyone with Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces placements, you're going to relate to very well. You will both be, emotional, sensitive. You'll both be wanting structure because of that strong emotion. And also the water signs, they really like to be very sensual and very romantic. They're kind of touchy-feely, I guess you could say. So there's a lot of, there'd be a lot of compatibility with fellow water signs for you too. But the one placement I look to more than anything for long-term compatibility is the descendant. You have descendant in Aquarius, so this shows that although I'm imagining you as kind of an introvert, however, because you have Leo rising, this shows that you are definitely able to make the first move. So the way I see things going is you would actually be the initiator in the relationship. You'd be the one that starts things. That is maybe kind of taking the lead with the courtship process. And descendant in Aquarius shows that you'd be attracted to someone who's a little bit more detached, someone who's like Aquarius basically. So someone detached, someone who's intellectual, someone who thinks kind of holistically. You have really strong compatibility with people that are like that, not only because of your descendant, but you also have South Node in Aquarius again too. So people with strong Aquarius placements, you'll relate to on a very deep level. And I typically, if I have to boil it down to just one sign for compatibility, I typically go with the sign of the descendant. So for you, that would be Aquarius. But because you have so many water placements, I think that both are important. There has to be some kind of balance there in someone's chart. So ultimately for compatibility, I think the best thing for you in astrological terms would be someone who has strong air energy. So that would be Aquarius, Gemini, or Libra, but also some strong earth or water there as well, especially Virgo or Scorpio, or maybe Cancer. What else here? The only element we didn't talk about was the fire signs. That I really see you having the least compatibility with these types of energies. So Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, Generally speaking, people with placements in these signs will be very outgoing, very fiery, very spontaneous, very impulsive, very confident. They take the lead. They're leaders. For you, I don't think this is so interesting because again, you're wanting someone that's more inward focused, someone who's more inwardly confident, not someone who's as outgoing. Also, again, I think you are the leader. You're the one that's kind of meant to take the lead to some extent. So if you're with someone else that's taking initiative, I think that may be kind of awkward. It may not work out with you as well. You sort of lack fire energy to some extent. You do have Mercury and Leo and ascendant there, but I just don't see a lot of desire or attraction to the fire signs for you. You're wanting someone that's more of a puzzle, more I don't know, someone who kind of keeps to themselves, someone who is very thoughtful, someone kind of more introverted, I think, is what you'd be attracted to. Definitely someone complex, someone who's a little mysterious. Okay, so yeah, the main signs again: Virgo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. Honestly, I think the earth and water signs would be most beneficial for you. That could apply to friendships as well. It doesn't have to be romantic. And you'll find, I think earth signs will be very valuable to you too, to be grounding, to help you feel in control and stable. Okay, so that concludes that part of the reading. Now I'm kind of just in the close, so at this point I like to look around the chart and just cover any loose ends, anything that I didn't get the chance to talk about in the rest of the reading. Something major that I've been kind of looking at that I haven't mentioned yet is you do have Mercury retrograde in 12th house Leo. This is real interesting in my opinion. So this is a rare placement. Only about 13% of the population has Mercury retrograde and in their natal charts. And when you have this placement, it means that the way you think about things is unlike other people. You have your own kind of way of thinking, analyzing, speaking even. Many people with Mercury retrograde have speaking or learning disabilities, but there is, I think, a lot of value in this placement as well, because having that uniqueness in the way you think, learn, communicate, etc., can be very valuable because it means that you have a unique viewpoint. I think many geniuses have Mercury retrograde because they have that unique way of understanding things. It can be very valuable. Also with Mercury retrograde, it's a very intuitive placement. You already have many other indicators in your chart showing that you're very intuitive or psychic. Again, you just see things in a different way. You can kind of see things before they happen. You know the kind of drift of things. Some people would call you an old soul. So yes, and then also the way that Mercury retrograde is positioned in your chart, it's in 12th house Leo. This to me is kind of like a gold mine when it comes to indicating strong ability for you to understand metaphysics, spirituality, to delve into spirituality, to delve into intuition. The reason being is because we already talked about Mercury in 12th house. So that means that you naturally think about and learn about topics that other people would think are strange or unusual, like astrology is kind of an obvious example, but concepts or people or things that others may think are too weird or too strange, you would be very open to. This is strengthened, I think, because you have Mercury in Leo. People who have Mercury in Leo are very open. And combining that with 12th house and with your water placements, this means that you'd be very open to some really deep metaphysical and spiritual information, I think. So kind of taking a step back and just looking at your chart, this to me looks like the chart of a very intuitive person, someone who maybe even has psychic abilities, and someone intelligent as well. You kind of have the best of both worlds. You have not only the intuition, I know I already said this, but it's a really strong theme or pattern here. You've got not only the strong intuition but also the strong logic and learning with the facts, learning information or data. And this sounds great. Like, it sounds like, oh, it's so easy. You're, so good at all this. But this is a huge responsibility. This is a huge challenge to have all this. It's a big weight that's put on you. And I do think it can be very isolating because other people are not going to understand what you're talking about or what you're learning about. They're not going to understand what you're feeling or thinking. So these placements, I do think, are very powerful. They can be very isolating as well. And they can be very difficult. I think that your soul kind of chose this is going to sound cheesy, but I think that you did choose sort of an extra difficult or complex role to take in this life than most do. And of course, I'm just speculating based on your placements here. Let's kind of take a step back and just talk more mundane for a second. So just about your kind of general personality here, you have Mars in Scorpio. This is a domicile placement, so this means that the way you respond to crisis situations, the way you handle your ambitions, are very linear, very straightforward. You're very strong in these capacities, and other people understand you in this area. You have other placements that suggest that you're not always well understood, kind of like I talked about earlier. Specifically, you have Sun and Mercury in 12th house, Venus is in detriment, Venus is in fall in Virgo technically. Moon is in fall in Scorpio. So these placements suggest that you have a very unique way of looking at things. You see things in a way that other people don't. Therefore, other people really don't always understand you. But again, what they do understand is what's represented by Mars and Scorpio. So the way you handle ambition, the way you handle confrontational situations. I definitely don't think you're the kind of person that's, going out, starting a fight or anything of that nature. But if you are backed into a corner because you have Mars in Scorpio and Moon in Scorpio as well, if you feel backed into a corner, whether it be literally or figuratively, you have this kind of fury or this wrath that you can unleash, to let people know not to mess with you. And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning of the reading, which is, you are a crab or you are a Scorpio. You have that hard shell. You have to protect yourself because, again, it's great being so intuitive, being so deep feeling, but, we have to be guarded in this life, basically. I think that's something that you probably are very familiar with. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up, but let me know your thoughts if you'd like. And anyone else who may be listening, thanks for making it to the end of the reading. If you'd like a reading like this, you can always hit me up. I put my information everywhere. You can look to the description for my websites, and you can purchase readings directly through there if you'd like. But anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity to read your chart. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And I hope you have a great day.